Hey, how is it going?
I'm good, thanks.
You're from Crytex Tech, right? I've got a question for you.
Sure, shoot.
So, I was wondering, why don't more companies don't even attempt to make semiconductor chips to meet the growing demands?
Ah, well, to understand that, why don't we go back a bit and understand the complexities of making a semiconductor chip? First, let's look at what semiconductors are. They are basically a type of metal that allow the electricity to pass through them and block it as well. This is what makes the transistor, that you can manipulate the flow or stop the signal from passing through, giving us the classics ones and zeros. Transistor acts as a switch which basically turns on and off. These are also known as logic gates, which are used to perform low power operations inside the processor. You can imagine that as a bridge where the car passes over the river. Through the bridge, the car can be said as electrons, wherein they want to pass from one point to another, which in turn makes the current flow. But when the drawbridge is up, stopping the cars to pass through, similar to the electrons. Now, you might have got some gist of it. These transistors are hard to minimize. So, the manufacturers use a process called photolithography. It's similar to a printer, and you can easily print various transistors over the silicon wafer. The wafer in there is usually pretty large to fit in many more transistors. The wafer is the size of a disk, and so you can fit over 2.6 trillion transistors over it, which is making the TSMC's 7 nanometer process. And the transistors now are going to a miniature size on a smartphone controller under 3 nanometer in 2022, and even the Apple's custom chip is at 5 nanometers. Intel is still stuck at 7 nanometers for the desktop class processors, which is not that bad comparing to the microcontrollers found in the smartphones. The transistor size is getting smaller every year while increasing the efficiency, but the efficiency and speed increase isn't as linear over 50 to 60% increase. The chips in the smartphone processor are usually 20 to 25% better over the previous counterpart, which is a much slower and steadier growth over year to year. You can see the TSMC's 7 nanometer isn't much smaller than the Intel's 14 nanometer, but it said that the chip can't go below 1 nanometer as the atom size is zero point 0.1 nanometer, which actually begs the question, what's the next thing after semiconductor? And so, not many manufacturers are able to make these chips. In addition to that, 2021 introduced a global chip shortage for semiconductors, and many of the device launch dates were affected because of it. The reason for that is majority of the chips were produced in Taiwan, which was 65% of the market share. I will just refer the semiconductor chips as chips from now on. So, the chips are mainly manufactured by TSMC, Global Foundries, Intel, and Samsung. TSMC is actually manufacturer of 50% of the smartphone chips, and Apple is the biggest customer, followed by Qualcomm and Nvidia. The manufacturing here requires at least 100 steps, which are supposed to be repeated over and over again. It also requires a huge investment, as Samsung had to make 355 billion USD investment for manufacturing of 3 nanometer chips before TSMC makes them. Crazy. To sum things up, these are the complications that a company will face if they are making a new semiconductor company. First one is the time. The raw silicon actually takes 3 months for converting them into semiconductor chips. Second one, land permit. Hundreds of acres of land is required to build up these companies, which is a huge investment. Samsung also invested 17 billion into making the chip plant, which will be launched in 2024. Third, expensive factory equipment. All of the components that are required for manufacturing this chips will be much more expensive than any traditional equipments required for a company. Fourth, dust free setup, which is required as the plants needs to be flawless to make these chips, and you have to wear disposable protective clothing wherein no dust is allowed inside the plant where the manufacturing is done. Fifth and the final one, the connections required to design and supply the materials. And every aspect of this sums down to the money. दुनिया अपनी मुट्ठी में. So, after all of this, coming to the main question, why didn't many companies attempt to make more semiconductor chips to meet the growing demand? There you go. Now you know why there aren't many semiconductor companies to work with. If you like this content, let me know in the comments below. Like this video, share, and subscribe. And see you in the next one. Peace.